Welcome back to this Bloomberg Special Report Space Race. I'm Alex Steele.
And I'm Ed Ludlow. Investors have poured nearly $200 billion into more than 1,500 space companies over the last 10 years, dwarfing the contracts awarded by NASA and other space agencies.
You might see the first trillionaire be a space-based business or be derived on that.
Morgan Stanley's Adam Jonas, who covers the auto sector, is one of the top analysts tracking the space race. And like everybody else, he is pumped.
I think that it would be very difficult in 10 or 20 years to imagine key businesses and ecosystems without the space backbone.
One thing that helped reignite investor interest in space.
Command and start. 2, 1.
Billionaires traveling to the stars.
On how it felt? Oh my God! My expectations were high and they were dramatically exceeded.
Amazon founder Jeff Bezos traveled aboard Blue Origin's first flight to space on July 20th.
Earth's atmosphere, it's so big, we live in it, and it seems gigantic, but when you get up there, you see that it's actually this teensy little thing that we need to protect. So, I don't know, for me, it was definitely incredible.
It was a key milestone in the company's effort to make space tourism viable and entice super wealthy customers to pay big money for a unique travel experience.
Space tourism is investable, it is sexy, but we think that the main value of space tourism, just in our team's opinion, is where it can go from here.
Bezos is not the only billionaire sending himself into space. On July 11th, Virgin Galactic founder Richard Branson made the journey to the stars. He sees space as a tourist destination, with his space line deploying reusable systems to shuttle customers back and forth to experience just a few minutes of weightlessness. I spoke with Branson just after he completed his flight.
I've always sort of pictured what it was going to be like. I mean, like the ride up there, the ride back. And I never realized that the whole experience was going to be so vivid. Woo!
One of the earliest and most active investors was Chad Anderson. His company has tracked the cash flowing in and out of space for years. He believes there's a lot more to come.
Early on, we had some wealthy individuals who were very excited about the potential of space technology and invested their own money, helped kick things off and get things started. The government played a key role early on in being an early funder and an early customer. And then venture capital firms got very excited about the opportunity, not just for rockets and satellites, but from the data that comes from those technologies. And today, we're seeing a lot of retail interest.
Money that once went primarily into rocket companies is being spread around more broadly as space startups join the SPAC wave. Mark Boggett's venture firm Seraphim Capital has been chasing space investments for more than 15 years. He says SPACs have helped accelerate the space race.
Most of these private companies are raising money annually in order to build out their operations. And it takes at least a quarter, if not two, for the management teams to engage with the private investors and to access the capital. So that takes a lot of serious management time off the business, focused on fundraising. So with SPACs, where these companies are raising larger sums of money, $300, $400, $500 million, which are really bringing forward some of their future rounds to now, it's a lot more efficient. So I think we've got many more space SPACs to come during the course of 2021.
Exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, brought another way for investors to tap into space. Over the past 3 years, a handful of space-themed ETFs have launched in North America and Europe that now hold about $800 million between them.
These vehicles are very much focused on the traditional space market because that's where most of the listed companies are. The new space market, the majority of the companies remain private.
The highest profile of that bunch is Cathie Wood and ARK's Space Exploration and Innovation ETF. Since launching in March, the fund has attracted more than $550 million of flows.
That ETF is an interesting one because when they launched it, it had a handful of the defense contractors that you would normally think of, the infrastructure companies that most people associate with space. But their largest holding is Trimble. And Trimble is a distribution company that brought us the first GPS receivers in the 80s.
Outside of the US, the funds are younger and smaller. Products like the Procure Space UCITS ETF in London and the Harvest Space Innovation ETF in Canada have attracted just a few $1 million after launching in the second quarter. And new products are launching every day.
We've recently launched the Seraphim Space Investment Trust on the UK London Stock Exchange. And that's a vehicle that we're targeting 20% per annum return over the longer term.
The bulk of the money is still in companies like SpaceX. A recent funding round raised over $1 billion from investors, including Fidelity Investments and Sequoia Capital. That round valued the company at $74 billion, according to Bloomberg. And it comes as Elon Musk promises to build out the ambitious Starlink network. Think thousands of connected satellites that can do revolutionary things like bring broadband services to millions, track refugees, and fight climate change while spotting storms before they get to catastrophic levels.
We have all these satellites that are orbiting our planet and gathering all this really valuable information. And we are just now beginning to harness that information, distribute that information. We're in a very similar place in geospatial intelligence as we were at the GPS. In the late 80s, early 90s. And so we see an equal amount of opportunity here for investors to make returns.
Investors are captivated by Starlink's potential to pay off. But the program will cost a lot of money. The total investment will be between $5 and $10 billion before the company is cash flow positive.
Step number one for Starlink is don't go bankrupt. That is, if we succeed in not going bankrupt, then that'll be great, and we can move on from there.
Musk says $20 to $30 billion could be needed to attain the goal of offering broadband to as much as 5% of the world's population, beyond the reach of conventional networks. The service has more than 69,000 active users and aims to quintuple that over the next year.
We think that the comms message there is much bigger, and the market is potentially much bigger than just providing internet to areas of the earth where there's unreliable or no internet service. That's certainly part of it, and there's a good ESG message there too. But we think by developing these orbits for high bandwidth, low latency communication, that will unlock things like urban air mobility and eVTOL, flying cars.
Blue Origin also has plans to compete in the satellite internet sector. Google, Amazon, and Microsoft have all invested heavily in cloud capabilities beamed in from beyond Earth's atmosphere. Morgan Stanley says it's largely this growth in space-based internet and data services that will drive the space industry to more than $1 trillion by 2040.
That's a fairly conservative 4 or 5% growth rate from the $400 billion space economy we are today. We think we're just scratching the surface. The hard part, Alex, will be not just the direct impact that space has on industry, but the indirect, right? So if you are able to turn on continents and open up more connectivity to not just homes, but vehicles, cars, ships, planes, everything that moves, as a second derivative, you may be opening up multiples of that $1 trillion number that wouldn't have been turned on if it weren't for the space comms. And that's just the comm side. Then you throw in transportation and EO, Earth observation, and we think we're being fairly conservative with that number.
Coming up, from profits to politics, there's more than just money on the line in the race for space.